Unit 3 Justifications Classical Approach 3.0 Objectives The familiarize the students with the four main issues of truth and justifications from Eastern and Western perspectives to encourage them to question the sources of justifications and certitude in knowledge to make the students realize the different types of certitudes possible. 3.1 Introduction. In order to understand justifications of knowledge, we begin with certitude, then we speak of the traditional ways of justifying knowing by using evidence. 3.3 Knowledge and certitude. During the course of our reflection so far, we have often had to raise the questions about certitude or certainty. Thus, when we explained what we meant by knowledge and how in our understanding of them term truth and reasonableness were essential characteristics of it. We we had already to raise the questions whether, if such were the case, it would be possible to say that we know anything for sure. That is with certainty. Again, when we discuss the validity of inference, we refer to the empiricist understanding of it as yielding only pragmatic probability, but not certainty. Again, when we discuss testimony, we conclude that belief could certainly be considered as reasonably, but left the questions of certainty till later. The problem of certitude became more acute. Of course, when we discuss truth, it is clear that it is one thing to say with truth is and what it is not. It is quite another to say whether and to what extent I can be certain of the truth, no matter how it is understood. Some Indian schools of philosophy, example Samakhya, who categorize true cognition as certain, asamdigdha, that is as subjectively certain and not only objectively uncontractable, abadhita. The notion of certitude. The scholastics generally define certitude as the firm assent of the mind to the truth based on evidence. This definition is certainly a good one, but we prefer to explain certitude in our own way, and the way we understand it is simply this: the conviction that such and such is not the case. The following explanations will hopefully make things clear. 1. Conviction. In our understanding of them, knowledge is the awareness that such and such is not the case. The notion of certitude as confusion adds to the notion of awareness. The scholastic from assent, but not so much as an act performed here and how, but rather as a physiological logical state of mind resulting from it. This is partly determined by the usage in modern English of the term used here, like assent. Another word for conviction is presumption. I can be aware of something that such and such is or is not the case, but depending on what the case is, as we are going to see, I can be more or less convinced or persuaded that is so. This can even be made clear if we compare and contrast other possible physiological state with regard to whether such and such is not the case as follows. Second, conviction and evidence. What makes all the difference between that state of mind when one doubts or that state of mind when one simply thinks that such and such is the case, and that state of mind when one is convinced, persuaded, certain that is so. In doubt, one has reasons for and reasons against that such and such is not the case. One is in evidence wavers between two reasons or set of reasons. When one thinks that such and such is or is not the case, one is inclined towards one side more than to the other. One has formed a probably of opinion about the matter but still hesitates to say definitely unwaveringly that it is so. Notice that this admits a range of degrees depending precisely on the force of the reasons towards which he is inclined to accept. It is only when one definitely decided for or against one side then he is convinced, when he is no longer afraid that there can any reasonable room for doubting, and therefore that he can be mistaken, that one is convinced and says that he is sure certain that such and such is or is not the case, and the reasons because of which he is moved to take such a step or to find himself in such a state of mind, or precisely what we have previously called the evidence. This is merely an analysis of the physiological process involved in actual life. It is often gone through spontaneously, unreflectively. Third eye, conviction and truth. Conviction refers to a state of mind. Truth refers to the correspondence itself between what is asserted or denied about whether such and such is or is not the case. Conviction is subjective, truth is objective. One can, in other words, be convinced that such is or is not the case, and if this does correspond to what in fact the case is, one is right, otherwise one is wrong. In the latter case, his conviction is erroneous. 3.4 Kinds of certitudes possible. We are going to touch here only on a very important questions. In fact, many everyday doubts regarding the possibility of being sure certain about different things, including, for example, the moral and religious matters, can and in fact does lead to a certain kind of skepticism, if not about the possibility of being sure of anything at all, at least about the possibility of being sure of certain matters. We have already raised so many questions in this regard in our very introduction. Often we become aware of so many opinions given on certain matters, one saying this and another saying completely different and contrary to the first, that one is tempted to disappear of knowing what to believe any longer. An analysis of the different kinds of certitude which are possible and reasonable, but only reasonable are to be expected in different matters, can help us sort things out. In a sense, it is true. One, it is either certain, convinced, or one is not. Strictly speaking, it would make no sense to say that I am more or less convinced. What I am really saying is that I have a strong opinion on the matter, but I am not yet convinced, and we have distinguished between the state and of mind implied by saying that one has an opinion and that implied by saying saying that one is convinced. Certain generally scholastics point out that the difference between the possible kinds of certitudes is not due to the degree of firmness of agent, nor is it due to the difference in the fields of knowledge, but on the kind of evidence available according to the case. Strictly speaking, this is according to us correct, but following our own line of expositions and keeping to our own understanding of the terms knowledge, truth, certitude, evidence. Be here again. Proceed in our own way. If certitude is based of evidence, we prefer to distinguish between the different kinds of possible and expected certitudes on the basis both of the different fields of knowledge and consequently of the different kinds of evidence. 3.5 Logical certitude. Here we are in the field of formal field of knowledge, the realm of pure ideas and the relationship between them, as in logic logic and mathematics. The evidence of the truth of the propositions is obtained by analysis of the terms and the definitions used. No other means of verification is needed or indeed possible. Here the truth is expressed in analytical propositions, which are therefore necessary true propositions or tautologies, and can be seen to be such even before a priori their applications to the other field of knowledge, and the certitude thus based on such kind of evidence admitting of no possible or conceivable exception can be called absolute. I am absolutely certain by a kind of logical certitude that if A is equal to B and B is equal to C, then A is equal to C. I am similarly certain that 2 plus 2 4. Again, I am similarly certain that it is either raining or not raining. Similarly, with definitions, I am certain in the same way that if I define a rational animal as man, then that man is a rational animal is for the absolutely certain. 3.5 Logical certitude. Here we are in the formal field of knowledge, the realm of pure ideas and 3.6 Ontological certitude. Here we are in the field of the informal knowledge of being as being, the realm of visible and tangible realities, but considered from the point of view of those characteristics which they have in common to the extent that they are beings existence. This realm could be considered as the counterpart, as it were, of the logical realm, if we are prepared to admit, as we pointed out before, that the laws of the mind, the logical realm, are based on the laws of being itself. The ontological realm, the evidence of the truth of the judgments is obtained certainly first from General experience, including sense experience, but more directly from or reflections on the nature of the judgment. It's as judgment, of course, there can be other methods, but ultimately certain laws of being itself can be insightfully discovered. What we have called first principles which not only are self-evident, can be denied without contradiction, but also serve as the ultimate basis for any further knowledge of reality. The self-evidence in questions here, however, is not merely logical but ontological, and the contradictions would not be one of the terms contradictions in terms, but a judgmental one and exertive contradictions. Here, the truth is expressed in synthetic, a priori judgments in our sense, not necessarily kinds, and the evidence thus based on such kind of evidence, again admitting of no possible or conceivable expectations, can also be called absolute. Thus, I am absolutely certain that I exist, that I can know at least something for sure, that we is and can't not be at the same time, etc. As we know, Sankara and Advaita in general says that Maya can be said neither to be real nor unreal, nor both real and unreal. In terms of logical values, Advaita, unlike Western logic, does not operate with the two-valued logic, that is true and false, but with a three-valued one, that is true, real, false, unreal, and indescribable. Hence, the relations between true and false is not a contradictory one, but only a contrary one. This is to say, if P standing for a thing concept of proposition is false, no one can infer that therefore non P is true, for it can be neither false nor true. Or, in other words, to say that Maya is not real, false. One can't infer that therefore it is real, true. But does but does all this really disprove the law of non-contradictions and the law of excluded middle? We think not. Later on, however, we shall try and explain that these laws and two valued operate only when what is asserted or denied or understood in a univocal sense. When we apply it when we apply it to religious language, they have to be applied in a qualified way. Even a three-valued logic can be ultimately reduced to a two-valued logic. Either what you are saying is true, that a valued logic, three-valued logic is possible and valid, or it is false. Logic is possible and valid, or it is false. A similar position is held by the Buddhist Nagarjuna and Madhyamika in general of no subject of no object. Whatever can be said that it is real, for real means existence in its own right, non-related and non-originated or unreal, for somehow it exists, it appears, or both real and non-real, or neither real nor unreal. For in these two latter cases, that would be more giveries. That is the famous way to arguing according to the four categories of thought and speech. Catus notice. First of all, that Madhyamika makes us e of this destructive latter cases, the would be more gay. But this is the famous way of arguing according to the four categories of thought and speech. Categories notice. First of all, that Madhyamikas makes us e of this destructive dialectic, not to deny the empirical value of logic, truth, and knowledge, but simply to show that from an ultimate point of view, the phenomenal world is not the really real, which is indescribable and beyond these categories of thought and speech. Secondly, it is clear from the third and fourth category the statements would be gibberish preciously, because they would express contradictory propositions. Only if real and non-real were understood in an analogical sense would the statement be intelligible. So once again, the Korskoti logic does not disprove the principle of contradictions and that of the excluded middle as we understand them. But from this Madhyamika logic, a lot can be learnt with respect to the use of logical language to speak about reality from an ultimate point of view. Again, something similar but not quite similar is found in the Jain doctrine regarding the indeterminate and multifaceted reality. Aninkatavada, no one thing can be understood thoroughly, for that would require that one knew it from all points of views and in all its relations. Only from an ultimate point of view can one know everything. Keval jana. So from the hybrid and empirical point of view, we have always to qualify our judgments as somehow sad, true, or somehow false. This is the Jain Sayadvada theory of knowledge. 3.7 Physical certitude. Here we are in the field of the knowledge of the things, of their properties and way of acting. The realm therefore of since the evidence of the truth of the laws of nature is obtained by first. Yeah. First of all, sense perception verifications or falsifications by laboratory conducted experiments of hypotheses formed, etc. Here, the opposite of a given law is not, at least theoretically inconceivable. Its truth is subject to our further understanding of how nature works. So to say, in this field, the only possible certitude we can have, and the only one to be expected, is physical certitude. It is not absolute but hypothetical, in the sense that I can say yes, I am sure on the possible evidence given so far. Hence, I can say hence I can say I am sure certain that the sun will rise from the east, that actions and reactions are equal and opposite, that the volume of a gas at constant temperature varies inversely with the pressure, etc. We need not to have recourse to the possibility of miracle to explain the hypothetical kinds of physical certitude. The language of modern scientists about the provisional character of all scientific laws is enough. 3.8 Moral certitude. Please note that he Please note that here we have to be carefully, for unlike the previous usage of the term certain or sure, which is a philosophical technical one, the usage of the term to be morally sure, it is also an everyday common one. We often use such expressions as I am morally sure that exam is postponed till next month, by which is meant that I am pretty sure that I have good strong reasons to believe that, etc. So we have distinguished between at least three meanings of moral certitude. Certitude in the field of knowledge of ethics, which studies how we should behave, the general norms and principles which should help him judge what is right or wrong, both in general and day-to-day situation, especially in conflict situation, etc. We are aware how especially today have certain questions regarding the moral justifiability of certain actions. Example: nuclear warfare, capital punishment, abortion, birth control, etc. are debated. We are all aware too that certain ways to behavior or of action which in the past were normally justified, today they are morally condiment. Example shall vary, or vice versa. Example: exacting interest on loans. This uncertainty can lead one to say that no certitude at all can be had in moral matters, and each one is to let himself be guided either by one's conscience or at most by the current customs of one's people. The disastrous consequences of such a positions can easily be ascertained. The thing is that people expect a kind of certitude in moral matters which is neither possible nor even to be expected. So how is the evidence of the truth in normal matters obtained? Here of course different methods can be and are are used if one based on ethics on the immediate data of moral consequences, which, as we said, can be seen to be self-evident. Example: the good is to be done, even to be avoided. Avoided if an out to do what is right, he can do what is right. Man out to fulfill himself as a man, etc. Then some truths in moral matters can be known with absolute certainty. Can be known with absolute certainty. This part could be considered as a part of ontology itself, and thus of this ontological certitude is possible. But as for the rest, evidence is obtained by God arguments, which bring us to the third meaning of moral certitude. We shall examine second meaning first. A second meaning of moral certitude is that which can be had in the field of knowledge of human nature, its physiological makeup, human social relationships and history. This is the realm of the human social sciences. What kind of evidence can be obtained for the truths of these science? Naturally, much depends on each science. Sociology or physiology use different methods than that of history. For example, depending on the way evidence is obtained, the kind of certitude possible would be different, but both sociology and physiology study certain human behavior constants. These, of course, are different for those constants studied and formulated as physical laws. For here, man is, because of his freedom, less predictable than things. But if I am told that an exploited class will sooner or later revolt, that a given culture is largely determined by its economy, that the population growth is inversely proportionate to technology and urbanizations, what evidence can I have for that, and how do I obtain it? It is clear that the evidence here is obtained through observation, which today is conducted on very scientific basis. The certitude based on such evidence can't amount to physical certitude. The field of knowledge, to start with, is different, and consequently the kind of evidence obtained the observations of the usual ways of human behavior. More's the certitude which is only possible here is moral certitude in this second sense. A third meaning and the fourth one, which follows, meaning of moral certitude, is taken more from the everyday usage of the term and has nothing to do with any particular field of knowledge. Whenever the only evidence I have for a given truth is testimony by witness, the spoken or written word of a reliable person, the only certitude which is possible and to be expected here is moral certitude in this third sense. And no matter where the field of knowledge is about a given law of nature, the scientist can have physical certitude, but a non-scientist who relies on this competence and reliability can only have about the same matters moral certitude spoke at some length about this kind of knowledge based on testimony and its reasonableness, and how, in point of fact, most of our knowledge is thus based on it. We need not repeat all that here. A fourth meaning, important to bear in mind, of moral certitude is when the evidence, no matter what the field of knowledge is based on good reasons. Testimony may be one, but if it is not only one, then we have moral certitude in the third sense. Here one has to have more than that. Notice that even in science, the scientist may start by having good reasons to form a hypothesis. At that stage, he has moral certitude about the truth of his hypothesis. By further research, moral certitude can become physical certitude, but in human science, the greater amount of reasons makes the truth more probably never a physical one unless one proves that the questions at issues is a physical phenomenon. When we speak of a moral matters, we said that apart from a small amount of truths, the greater part are based on good reasons. Of this we can only have moral certitude. In this fourth sense, this need not dismay us. On the contrary, this should liberate us from that anxiety to look for absolute certitude, where such a thing is neither possible nor to be expected. In fact, moral certitude in the fourth sense is stronger than the one in the third sense. Actually, moral certitude in the third sense is the weakest of the lot, but still it could, given the nature of the case. That is, how can I be sure who my parents are of the actual conditions of the knower? That is, how can I be sure that there are a north and the south pole? It is the only moral certitude to be expected, but notice that often moral responsibility demands that, given the nature of the case and the actual conditions of the knower, that latter should not content himself with doctor in the exercise of his duties with the patients, the counselor with the counsel. Hence the distinction between ignorance, absence of that knowledge, and moral certitude expected, and Nissan's absence of that knowledge and moral certitude not expected from one. 3.9 Religious certitude. Here we are in the field of religion's knowledge, but a lot of have first we said before we can adequately tackle the nature of religious certitude, the kind of evidence on which it is based, how we go about obtaining such evidence, the nature of religious truth, and the kind of language it is expressed in. All we have said so far in this section is meant to clear the ground for the religious epistemological question. But by way of anticipations, lest we should have the questions of religious certitude hanging in the air, so to speak, viewed from now past the following remarks in our way of proceeding, where we are distinguishing meanings of certitudes or kinds of certitude on the basis of both of the field of knowledge and consequently on the kind of evidence possible in that field. It is already to be foreseen that the kind of religious certitude possible and to be expected given the specificity of the field of knowledge concerned will be specifically different, at least at some stage or level of the process by which one obtains it, from every other kind. It is an observable fact that most people inherit, so to say, religious beliefs from their parents, educators, etc. Hence, the conditioning factor here brought by society on one's religious beliefs, and for that matter, on other beliefs of this political, social, and other fields. This, of course, raises the questions whether and to what extent such conditioned religious knowledge is genuine knowledge, but that is not what concerns here directly. What concerns us here is to observe that at the beginning and in most cases throughout one's life, man's religious belief is based on the witness testimony of others. We discuss the conditions under which is could be considered reasonably, but at any rate the certitude based on it can only be moral certitude in the third meaning of the term explained above. Even at a higher or deeper level, when one starts thinking out for oneself, if these religious beliefs remain based on the evidence of these of his respective scriptures, written testimony, his certitude can only be moral certitude, and his religious beliefs remain beliefs. Still, if at this stage one sees more and more reasons to confirm, corroborate, justify his religious belief, indicating the reasonableness of his act of believing in those particular scriptures and in their contents, answering difficulties which may arise in a reasonably way, showing that authenticity of opposite beliefs in a fairly convincing way, etc., then he can be said to be morally certain. In the fourth sense of the term, a convergence of probabilities. Newman in this respect can even amount to something like, but perhaps not quite, ontological certitude, if that is this convergence can be seen to point to, or to be finally based upon, a self-evident truth, insightfully intuited. Many great philosophers who were at the same time great religious men claim something further, and herein lies, according to us, the specificity of religious attitude, and this is the more noteworthy since these men belong to different religious traditions. They claim a direct perceptions of supra-sensible reality, of reality in its ultimate significance, in its ultimacy or ultimate causes. Hence, they distinguish two levels of reality: the empirical and the transcendental. Two levels of experience: the Vyavharika drishti and the Paramarthika drishti. According to Vedanta, Jaina, and Buddha, and the rational and the spiritual, according to Christianity, and hence two levels of knowledge and of certitude. 3.10 Towards of justifications of knowledge. Our next set of topics we will about a set of questions concerning knowledge and its justification, distinguishing the skeptical questions from Socratic questions. We will deal on what justifications of knowledge implies, some background knowledge, and especially on propositional knowledge may be useful for Feldman 2010. The traditional tripartite understanding is that knowledge is justified true belief. This implies that what is needed in addition to true belief is traditionally said to be good reasons or evidence or justification. So the traditional analysis of knowledge holds that knowledge is justified true belief having good evidence. In other words, S knows that P if and only if S believe that P, it is true that P. S is just in believing that P. These three conditions must all be satisfied dependent if in the case of justified true knowledge if only any two of the above conditions are satisfied then we assert that the knowledge is not fully justified. 3.11 Some issues of justification. 1. Justifications of knowledge needed for epistemology requires very strong reasons that there can be reasons that make belief more reasonably than denial or suspensions of judgment, but still fall short of reasons good enough for knowledge. Example: weather forecast, election forecast, etc. Feldman 2010. But in many cases, knowledge does not always require absolute certainty. Perhaps we can have something like evidence that puts the propositions beyond all reasonably doubt, thought not beyond all possible doubt. Example: all lights are on in my room. Water freezes at 00 Celsius under normal conditions, etc. 3. A related idea is the justification does not guarantee truth. Victims of prophet hallucinations or extremely well done deceptions may have justified but false beliefs, but may be nearly rarely false. For evidence and practical reasons, there is a big difference between having evidence for the truth of a propositions and motivations for believing it. Thus justifications need to always lead to practical consequences. This is because there are difference between reasons for belief and reasons for acting. 5. Source of justified belief and knowledge are perceptions, introspections, memory, reason. These are physiological processes in us and may be faulty and times. 6. What about intuitions, faith, and mystical experience? Can they be fully justified? Please note a difference between initiation as something weird and spooky, and as merely acute deep perception which no doubt exists and is, I think, a source of justifications. Whether the others are a source of knowledge and justifications is a more continuous issue. Notice that we have considerably evidence about the nature and merits of perceptions and memory, and we lack comparable evidence about the merits of faith or mystical experience, so that does seem to be a basis of treating them differently. 7. William K. Clifford's principles is not worthy. It is wrong always, everywhere, and for active perception which no doubt exists and is, I think, a source of justification. Whether the others are a source of knowledge and justification is a more continuous issue. Notice that we have considerably evidence about the nature and merits of perceptions and memory, and we lack comparable evidence about the merits of faith of mystical experience, so that does seem to be a basis for treating them differently. 7. William K. Clifford principles is not worth it is the wrong always, everywhere, and for anyone to believe anything upon insufficient evidence. Through theoretically this principle is perfect, it is not only always clear what he meant by insufficient. The principle says that it is wrong to believe when the evidence is not super supportive. We can generalize and assert that it is wrong to disbelief when the evidence is supportive, wrong to suspend judgment when the evidence is not disbelief when the evidence is supportive, wrong to suspend judgment when the evidence is not counterbalance. In other words, several evidence determines which is the right attitude. For Feldman 2010. The significance of Clifford's principle is that it says that evidence is the determining factor. How important something is, how nice it would be for it to be true, etc., make no difference. 8. A popular slogan is everyone has a right to believe what they want, as a real principle that seems admirable, since we do not want third censoring and moral policing, but as an epistemological principle. This slogan is mistaken and it conflicts with the suggested interpretations of Clifford principle. Clifford principle is good enough principle, provide provide we clarify that is insufficient evidence. 3.12. Unjustified beliefs. There is a large literature dealing with situation in which people have unjustified beliefs that are not supported by their evidence. Thinking about some of these cases can help to clarify the concept of justification, since some of the errors as pointed out by Richard Feldman, University of Rochester are relevant in our discussion on the justification beliefs. It will be useful to review them here. The point out of the fact that in spite of the best efforts of epistemologists, human beliefs and convictions are not always based on justified knowledge. Sometimes they prefer to act according to unjustified beliefs. Refusal to revise one's view in the light of competing evidence. The militaries were a religious group who predicted that the end of the world was coming soon. As the date passed, each time they pushed back the date a little rather than acknowledge the overall weakness of their general view, or they even stick to their diagnosis in the face of undermining evidence, with some made of explanations for why things did not exactly happen as they predicted. The just refused to revise one's convictions on the basis of completing evidence. In such cases, it seems that the order in which you get the evidence does not matter. The example of a detective is insightful. Some evidence makes me suspect that it is guilty, and I believe it. Then I get comparable evidence that it's B, but because I already believe or tend to believe it, I do not revise my belief to confirmations arises. This is a tendency to look for evidence that confirms what we already believe rather man evidence that goes against it. For example, after conflicting studies arguments, the tendency is the both sides become more convinced of their initial views. An argument normally reinforces my positions along these lines. Is another fact. We tend to hang out with like-minded people who will reinforce our prejudice. prejudices, but notice the difference between getting based information, treating competing evidence in an equitable way. The latter is an error of rationality, the former is a different sort of error. Perhaps we can say that there are errors in dealing with the evidence we have and errors in collecting evidence. But if we know that our sources are not representative, then we have reason to treat them differently than if you don't know that and if we don't have reason to think that our sources are in some way biased, then it's not clear that we have made any error of rationality at all. Yet another point to note is this: if we have good reason to think that one group is more reliable about a topic than another, and we hang out with the people you have good reason to believe to be reliable, and then our beliefs are swept by them, it is hard to see that we are making any kind of error. This leads to further confirmation basis. 3. Availability error. It is to base our judgments on vibed or memorable evidence rather than unreliable evidence. It is to base judgments on vibed or example using personal recommendations rather than statistics, as in forming beliefs about which car or computer is most reliable. This makes for puzzling example about learner reflective. People believe the positions of the moon can affect behavior and make people crazy. Therefore, the term "lontix" carefully study undermines this. One explanation is that the cases of crazed behavior in a full moon are more memorable. Media reporting is another, but on the latter option, what is our evidence about this? 4. Ignoring the evidence. From time to time, we engage in such things as wishful thinking or fearful thinking. Example: optimistic and pessimistic students. In many cases, our emotions rather than our evidence guide our beliefs. When the resulting beliefs are unsupported, they are epistemically unjustified even if they have some important personal value. 3.13. Let us sum up. After having spoken of the kinds of certitudes we understand knowledge are justified true beliefs, we took up some issues connected with justifications and evidence. Then we saw briefly some reasons for unjustified beliefs and why people keep on holding to them in spite of contrary evidences.